Okay. So, like I said, we'll probably be able to get through about 2 chapters from this. So we'll try our best to at least do that. I really want to finish this game before Silent Hill F comes out, and we're definitely going to be able to do so. If I quickly just look over the chapters one last time, let me just go to configure something. So it's about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Assuming chapter 5 is an hour as well, it'll be 11. So, and then with the extra minutes, let's say about 14 hours, plus the extra 7 hours at the very end for the final chapter, for the actual fucking finale. Oh boy. So, because we're going to be doing this on Wednesday as well, and Thursday, for a good while. Yeah, we're definitely finishing this way before Silent Hill F comes out. But alright, for reals, let's go ahead and start. Higurashi, Matsuribayashi. Matsuribayashi. At least let it end with a blissful dream. Festival accompanying chapter. The riddle you have been entrusted with solving now finally becomes unraveled. What must be done to stop the chain? And what will happen in the ultimate end? It's a showdown between the conclusion you reached and the one I reached. There is no difficulty. You should understand that now. If I recall, Matsuribayashi means like festival music. Let me double check. Let's find out. Yes, it means festival music. So, yeah, let's start. God, that always creeps you out. The sound of children happy. Everyone is entitled to happiness. The difficult part is accepting that. Everyone is entitled to happiness. The difficult part is fulfilling that. I too am entitled to happiness. The difficult part is working out a compromise. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons or organizations is entirely coincidental, as we all know. The study was filled with piles of books and papers. In that study, there was a full-figured old man writing something at his desk in utmost concentration. Is this Oishi? So here we have a new background, which is just some bookshelves. If we change it to console background, here we can see it even messier. Looks neat. Let's go back to the original backgrounds. There was also a little girl sorting out papers on the carpet. She almost looked as though she was playing with them. But the serious expression she was wearing made it clear that she wasn't.
おじいちゃん、資料の分けっこができたよ。
ありがとう。さてさて、どういう結果になったかな？
同じ症例の人がこれだけ集まった。
I was about to say, this is fucking Takano with her grandfather.
全国平均と比べても明らかに異常なくらい。
やはりな。
Okay, sorry, there's a new background as well. You can see a blurred out clock. And here we see no clock.
「こっちも興味深い論文を見つけたところだ。精神外科と文化についてまとめたものでな。前頭葉に宿主とは別の意志を持った存在があることを予見したものだ。
Interesting.
前頭葉は人間が人間らしくあることを司る部分だよね。
そうだ。 人の感情は心が生み出すのではない。脳という名の器官が分泌物を生み出して与える副産物に過ぎ、その脳に特定の干渉をするナノ単位の生命体の集合が存在し、ある命令系統を持つ一つのコロニーに関与したならば。
Give me 1 second. The music is still a little too loud compared to the voices, so I'm gonna do this. And then I'm just gonna crank up the audio for you guys. Like so. So are parasites the cause of the spread of ideology? When ideologies clash, is that because different parasites are competing to expand their
あ
habitat?
るいは教育の分布か、国境の分布か、人種の分布か。我々の世界の異なる文化コミュニティの存在と、その対立の一因は、そういった人の思想に影響を及ぼす微細な生命体の存在にあると仮定している。
おじいちゃんと同じことを考えている人が外国にもいたんだね。
もちろんいるとも。可視不可視を問わず、地球上には無数の生命体がいて、その中には宿主の体内に潜伏して共存し、時には宿主を支配したりすることが広く知られている。そして実際に人体内にその存在をたくさん発見してもいる。にもかかわらず、人体に潜伏し、その宿主を支配する生命体の存在については頑くなに否定してきた。家庭すらも含めてな。
どうしてだろうね。人間だけ特別な存在のわけはないのに。
それを仮定することはすなわち、意志に基づいた言動や信念を疫学的原因から派生したものと置き換えられて、対処策もそれと同様とみなされる危険があるからだ。
If conflicts in ideology can be resolved through debate, then they're peaceful. But if those conflicts occur epidemically, they become frightening. And if one were to treat bad thoughts or the spread of culture as an epidemic, then
中
yeah.
世の歴史に登場するペストなどを想像しなさい。悪い伝染病が大流行する。その患者を強制的に入院させ、完治するまで退院させない。完治できず、そのまま病院で死んでしまうこともある。すると、その死体は焦燥となる。さらに、患者が触れたものまで衛生のため、すべて没収して焼き捨てる。身近の家族にも感染の疑いがあるから、強制的に入院させねばならん。
So they'd hospitalize healthy people over individual ideas.
思想を病気と置き換えなさい。
The rest is the
完
same.
治するまで退院させない。触れたものは感染の疑いがあるから全て焼き捨てる。家族にも感染の疑いがあるから強制入院。
でも思想なんて個人の自由なんでしょ。ペストとは違う。
If an idea was created by parasites, it would be exactly the same as a
つ
plague.
まり思想は治療不可能な伝染病と置き換えられるわけだ。
So you mean anyone with a different idea is treated like they have a disease?
そういうことだ。この考えを延長すると、無差別、そして無秩序な大量虐殺が起こる。そうすると、人類は大規模な粛清を肯定してしまう論調になりかねん。だから、脳内で宿主を支配する生命体を語ることは、今の時代ではタブーになっているのだ。
It's kind of crazy how, like, relevant this is even in current time. Even in 2025, stuff like this is very, very, very relevant. Be it politically or medicinally. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're in, for example. This applies to both ends. Because you will have people on both sides come to this exact conclusion as well. That the other side is infected for some fucking reason, just because that person disagrees with whatever they agree with. And stuff like that is incredibly infuriating, in my opinion. One other thing that he mentioned, just regarding the parasite stuff, like, oh, what if like parasites are able to control your thoughts, or what if parasites are able to influence people? I think I've talked about this before. I don't remember if I have on stream though, or during Higurashi. I won't go too much into it, but how do I even begin to word this? So it's been hypothesized by an individual that is no longer alive that cancer, for the most part, I believe she mentioned something, it was either 60% or 90% of cancer patients are misdiagnosed, and that a good chunk of them just have a parasite inside of them that can be easily cured through just very common remedies, like just common plants that you can find outside can cure and kill this parasite that infects most cancer victims. And if true, it would immediately cripple the entire cancer industry. That entire medical industry would be just fucking dead. Because imagine if it's like, oh, it's just a parasite. Take this pill. You don't have cancer anymore. But instead, you kind of have to go through all this shit and suffer. Because that's how that industry churns, and that's how that industry keeps making money. It's insane. But anyway, back to this.
タブーって？
触れてはならない。考えてもならないということだな。だから誰も研究せん。いや、それどころか、脳内に侵入し、影響を及ぼす存在がいると考えることすら忘れられている。万物の長たる霊長類を支配する未知の生命体などいるはずがないと頭から決めつけている。
なんだかいないことの証明なんて悪魔の証明。絶対に不可能なのに。
その通り。悪魔がいることを証明することはたやすい。悪魔を連れてくればいいのだからな。だが、いないことを証明することはできん。いないを連れてくることなどできんのだからな。
なんだか脳を支配する生命体が自分たちの存在を秘密にするためにその宿主の人間たちを操っているみたい。
My grandfather and I shared a happy laugh together.
人間も自然界の生き物の一つに過ぎん。食物連鎖の頂点にいるだけで、それをもって神格化された存在であると思い込むなど愚かしいことなのだ。人とてあらゆる微生物やウイルスに支配されうるのだ。その存在が今日まで発見されていないからといって、それをもって存在しないという証拠にはならん。絶対に存在する。必ず存在するのだ。
科学の世界にもたくさん存在が仮定されていて。
そうだ。それらの仮定をした科学者が全て生きているうちに評価を受けられたわけではない。
Oh, actually, before I do forget, I need to do this. Shit, what was it? No, I guess we're fine. I'll worry about this later. I think the video capture will be fine anyways.
世まいごとだと呆れられ、その正しさを証明できなかった科学者も大勢いたのだ。
でも、おじいちゃんは生きているうちに証明されるといいね。じゃなかったら、おじいちゃんがかわいそう。
There it is.
大丈夫だよ。神様は努力する者を見捨てたりはしない。努力は 必ずいつか結実するのだ。
いつかってそれはいつ？
神がいつ降臨されるのかは誰も知らない。それは例えるなら泥棒がいつ訪れるのかわからないように。だから予期せずしてその時を迎えて、不信心であったことに歯ぎしりすることがないよう常に目を覚ましていなさい。
That was something that my grandfather said all the time. Nobody knows when efforts will bear fruit, but it will happen one day. That's why you must always work hard so you have no regrets when the time comes. Your efforts will bear fruit someday. That's what he meant.
でもおじいちゃんが生きているうちに絶対に努力が実る？生きてるうちに認められなかった科学者がたくさんいるのに？
That was such a cruel thing to say. But I didn't mean to be cruel. I had seen how hard my grandfather had been working, and I also knew that he wouldn't live forever. I just wanted his work to gain recognition before he died. Do you know the My god. They keep bringing up Christianity. It's so fucking annoying. Yeah. He was crucified and resurrected after 3 days. He told me about it. How do you think he was resurrected? Didn't he just get up as if blah blah blah? He was buried after his execution. His body was in the ground. Did he break open a tombstone and crawl out? No, that wouldn't be a resurrection. Sinners would kill him. But imagine the same thing. You predicted that before he was executed, he would come back to life in 3 days. They buried him. But what he meant was he wasn't going to resurrect physically. He meant his teachings would be resurrected. After 3 days, his teachings were resurrected and people regained their belief. But the hearts of those who wanted to show... the hearts of those who wanted to be shown the proper way... Blah, blah, blah. That was what the resurrection is all about. Yeah.
たとえ死後であっても正当な評価を受けられたなら、その偉業は必ずやよみがえる。その時私の体が朽ち果ててしまっていても、私の存在はよみがえって評価を受けるのだ。
それはおじいちゃんが神様になったということ？
そうだよ。私の研究はいつか必ず認められる。その時、おじいちゃんは神様になれるということなんだよ。だから自分が生きているうちに評価されることに焦る必要はないのだ。その時が訪れるのが私が生きているうちなのか、それは神様にもわからない。だがその日は必ず訪れる。だからその日の訪れを疑うことなく、ひたすらに努力を続けなくてはならないのだよ。
Those were the last words I heard Grandpa say ever. The following day, he was struck by lightning, as if smited by God. I cursed him on that day, and vowed to avenge my grandfather and his research, to immortalize him and myself as the new reigning god of this world. It was very sad to hear my grandfather say that his life would end one day. He wasn't ill, and he didn't only have a few years left to live, but set next to the average lifespan, his remaining years didn't look like much. The only person left in my life was my grandfather, so I didn't even want to consider what it would be like with him gone. Grandfather must have remembered that I didn't like to talk about that subject. With a tender smile, he gently patted my head.
もちろんおじいちゃんも自分が生きているうちに研究を認めてもらいたい。だから。
Oh, skipped it, but he says I will do my best.
私もおじいちゃんが世界中の人に褒めてもらえるようにいっぱいいっぱいお手伝いする。
I purposely didn't mention the before you die part. I caught myself before I said it.
ありがとう。嬉しいぞ。
Grandfather smiled in satisfaction. His research wasn't exactly outrageous, but he wasn't trying to uncover the mysteries of the universe. He was only searching for the possibility that parasites could be responsible for human behavior. Nothing more than that. Nothing outrageous. It really wasn't a wild idea. We've even had some leads. Hinamizawa Village, Shibuya City, so-and-so prefecture. The villagers there are possessed by a powerful homesickness. When they're unable to return, they allegedly behave abnormally, as if they are cursed. There are also some bizarre rules in place in the village, based on their belief system. When he was working with the military during the war, my grandfather noticed similarities between the people in Hinamizawa and assumed that some kind of existence was responsible for their odd behavior. He'd been researching it ever since then. In the middle of the 20th century, numerous strange diseases were discovered all over Japan. Most of them were caused by infectious parasites, and people started to pay attention to this forgotten field of study. Grandfather's research was simply one of those investigations into such diseases. Therefore, he believed it would be published amongst other research and attain recognition soon. But if his research didn't bear any fruit before his death, I wanted to continue it. I wanted to continue his research. Grandfather taught me resurrection isn't something that happens physically. It's when your life's work is appreciated. That's what he meant by resurrection. That's when he'll become a god. So when my grandfather dies, he'll still be with me forever. I wouldn't have to be alone ever again. I will always be with my grandpa. Our works will gain recognition, and we'll both become gods, gaining eternal peace. I will make my grandfather into a god. I will become a god. Therefore, we will be granted eternity. We'll be together forever and ever. And now we get creepy music. But anyway, here's a new background. In the console version. I was looking at the key on the keychain. The key was labeled Hen House, but the lock Eriko was trying to open didn't belong to that door. It should have opened effortlessly. At least that's what was supposed to happen. But it didn't open. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Eriko's forehead. She was the one who came up with this idea. Eriko was starting to panic. The rest of us started to panic too. This only opens the hen house. Let's stop. Let's go back. Shush. We were supposed to be cleaning out the hen house. If they found us back here, if they found out why we were here and why we were trying to open up the lock to the back door, then all four of us were sure to be sentenced to Splayed Piggy. Huh? Hey? Huh? The fuck do you mean, Splayed Piggy? The fuck? Okay. Don't panic, Eriko. That key opens this lock, right? You already tried it, right? Will you shut up for a minute? This is the right key. It's just hard to open, that's all. She was almost shrieking. Our hearts were pounding loudly. It was as though the sound of our heartbeats was echoing throughout the hallway. And at that point, we heard footsteps that didn't belong to a child. Shush! Somebody's coming! The three of us held our breath, but Eriko didn't hear it. She kept fussing with the lock and key, as if everything would be okay if she could just open the lock. Eriko, someone is coming. Be quiet. I know this is the right key. I'm not dreaming. I already tried it and it opened. Come on, why isn't this working? When this lock opens, we can be happy and we can say goodbye to this hell. Eriko, someone's coming. Oh, jeez. Just an explosion. My father and mother died. Here we have another new background. Although this one I believe we've seen before, this console one. I don't remember if this original one we've seen before, or if it's just been years, well, ages I guess, since like chapter 3 or something. I don't know exactly how old they were. I was too young to remember. They went shopping without me, and that must be why they were punished. It was a train accident. What a terrible disaster. A lot of people died in that incident. But maybe my father was one of the lucky ones. He was still alive when he arrived at the hospital, so he was able to share his final words with me. My mother died instantly.
お父さんお父さんお父さんお父さん
I didn't want to admit that this person I could hardly recognize was my father. As I called out to him, I hoped that it was someone else instead. But, unfortunately, it was my father. Maybe I shouldn't have woken him. Because when I woke him up, he was reminded of the miserable agony that he had forgotten.
お父さんお父
He tried to move his right arm so he could pat my head, but his arm was wrapped in bandages and his hand was no longer there. I couldn't find his hand anywhere on the bed. I only had scary memories of his right hand. Its main job was to slap me when I did something bad, but I never wished it to be gone. Besides, that hand also patted my head, even though that only happened a few times. It was a big, warm hand and it stroked my head very gently. But no matter what good deeds I did, he could no longer rub my head. No. His hand was the least of his worries. He had to go into emergency surgery. Doctors already warned me that the chance of him surviving was very low. That was why I was allowed to see him regardless of his condition. Not only could he no longer rub my head, he might be gone forever.
お父さん、手術できっと良くなるよね。お父さんきっと元気になれるよね。なれるよね。
よく聞きなさい。お父さんはダメかもしれない。もしもお父さんが死んでもお前はしっかり生きるんだよ。
嫌だ嫌だ、お父さんは元気になるよ。お医者様がちゃんと手術してくれるもん。だから死んだりなんかしないんだよ。
He was a stubborn and old-fashioned father. He believed endurance was a virtue, and he never complained about anything. That was why I couldn't believe he actually said he might not make it. I tried to desperately deny his words, but even that wish wouldn't prolong his life. My father, knowing his time was limited, tried to tell me some important things, but I interrupted his efforts by crying like a baby. I just wanted him to slap me, just like he used to do every time I cried, but he would never slap me again.
よく聞きなさい。お父さんもお母さんも親類というものがいない。だからお父さんが死んだらお前の世話をしてくれる人は誰もいない。
He didn't need to tell me that. My parents used to tell me that all the time, so I was aware of the fact. In other words, my father was the only relative I had left in this entire world.
もしもな、お父さんが死んだら高野先生を頼りなさい。
I knew it.
高野ひふみ先生だよ。言ってみなさい。
高野ひふみ。
そうだ、高野ひふみ先生だよ。高野先生はお父さんの恩師なんだ。きっとお前を助け
お父さんお父さんお父さんお父さん。
Many doctors came into the room in a hurry. He wanted to tell me something else, but the doctor stopped him from talking, so I wasn't able to hear him. I was kicked out of the room. I didn't know what to do. Nobody told me how my father was doing or when the surgery was going to start, and nobody told me that was going to be the last conversation I ever had with my father. I think I asked people at the government office about Dr. Takano. They'd asked me if I knew his phone number. I said I didn't. Then they didn't ask me anything further. Sometimes they told me they'd look into it, but nothing led to anything. They couldn't find me a guardian, so I ended up going to an orphanage. At the time, there were plenty of orphans from the war, so although there were many orphanages around, they were all full. There were also some orphanages run by civilians. I was sent to one of those civilian orphanages. There was no profit to be had in taking in an orphan in the first place. So I thought those civilians who were running orphanages must have been very good people. I was sure they hoped that the children would grow in this loving environment and enter into society with a sense of gratitude. But reality isn't so kind. How many children in this world can actually express their gratitude toward their parents in the first place? Children are supposed to be nurtured by their parents' love. Therefore, when that environment is destroyed, their hearts are wounded. Every child has his or her own personality. Receiving affection doesn't guarantee that a child will become someone angelic. Not everyone's heart can be healed. That was why there were some problem kids at the orphanage. Maybe I shouldn't call them problem kids, though. The sadness and despair of losing their parents and the anger at having to hide such feelings filled those kids' hearts. Spending time individually with the children could have solved their own problems. But at the orphanage where I was, none of the staff members even tried to spend time with them or put in an effort to understand them. All they could do was make sure that the kids followed the rules. Therefore, they could only see the children's emotional pleas for help as problems. In this world, nobody expresses love without expecting something in return. The person who founded that orphanage was expecting something in return as well. He wanted the children to appreciate him. That was why such a faint dream was destroyed by cruel reality. The children called the orphanage a prison, and nobody appreciated the staff at all. In fact, all they did was complain. That made the staff slowly realize that love alone couldn't run a facility like that. Just like how the children called it a prison, the staff started to recognize the facility as a prison too. It was a chain reaction resulting from mistrust on both sides. The staff bound the children with rules so that they could suppress problem behavior. There was a framed picture of the founder of this orphanage, but I've never seen him in person. Was he satisfied with the fact that he put his own money into the social service? Or maybe he finally realized his dream of being surrounded by angelic children and being celebrated for what he did was simply that, a dream. I don't know. But there's one thing I'm certain of. Such a dream didn't exist at the orphanage. There were so many rules and several plausible standards outlined for us. The most valued one was silence. Children's chatter tends to increase each other's volumes, just like mics drawing closer, and sometimes that leads to fights and the disturbance of order. So children were forbidden from speaking with each other. With those disallowed, they must have thought things would go smoothly. However, I think I always heard people's voices at the orphanage. There were two kinds of voices. One was the staff yelling, and the other was the children crying. We were not allowed to walk around inside of the orphanage freely, so we never knew who it was that was crying. One time, along with the crying and yelling, we heard the noise of metallic things being smashed against each other. We knew it was some kind of punishment, but there was no way for us to even imagine what it was. We trembled, pretended we didn't hear anything, and kept working on our assignments. One of my roommates told me it was the casket punishment, but she didn't tell me any further, and I didn't want to know either. Even if we behaved exactly the same way as yesterday, if the staff were in a bad mood, they might pick on us. So even if I didn't want to know, I might suddenly find out what the casket punishment is one day. The footsteps of a staff member were getting closer. We noticed them, so we straightened our backs and pretended we were studying hard. It was more important that the staff saw us doing so than us actually getting any work done. I noticed the girl next to me was falling asleep, so I poked her with my elbow. She noticed my signal and straightened her back like the other children. It was almost evening. This was the hardest time for us to keep ourselves awake, and the most dangerous time. The door to a room opened, and a mean-looking man showed up. Then he looked around to make sure none of us were falling asleep. But if we were actually studying hard, if he thought we were asleep, we were out. That was why we had to make sure we appeared to be studying very hard. The man walked around our desks. I hoped he would just walk by me. That was what we all prayed as we kept working on our homework. The more we pretended to study hard, the more we could hear the sound of metal objects. The sound of metal objects crashing into each other along with screams. We couldn't even imagine what the poor subject of that punishment was going through. Maybe there was something even worse than the casket punishment. To erase such fears, we tried to concentrate even harder on our work. We kept working, as the metal sounds and the screams went on forever. The only time we were allowed to exchange words with our roommates was right after turning the lights off and to go to bed. Being located in the middle of the mountains, the orphanage was very quiet at night. After making sure the staff members were far enough from our room, we enjoyed talking amongst ourselves. That was the only leisure time allowed to us, though it wasn't anything nice like enjoying pleasant conversations. Why? Because we mostly talked about others behind their backs. We spoke of things like that member of staff is only strict or unfair or malicious towards this person, and so on. We just repeated those topics forever until someone couldn't keep themselves awake anymore. We even discussed how we could get back at the staff, and we took revenge on all of them in our imagination. Some kids even started to cry when talking about it. It was difficult as it was for us. Although the subjects we spoke of were negative, talking about them was the only way to vent our frustration, and even though we felt despair about tomorrow, we were able to fall asleep. But sometimes a different subject popped up. Escape. Oh. It was about the Yurigaoka House of Love and Mercy on the other side of the river. Oh. Shit. The game crashed. But sometimes a different subject popped up. It was about the Yurigaoka House of Love and Mercy on the other side of the river. Yeah, over there I hear they only got nap time, but not only nap time but snack time too. Plus their president is a very nice person. The House of Love and Mercy was a privately run orphanage, just like the one I was at. But it was a very kind facility unlike ours. It seemed like a fantasy land compared to our current environment. A few years before, when this place was a lot worse, a few children tried to escape. It was hard to believe. There was a time when this orphanage was even worse to live at. Supposedly, 3 or 4 people tried to escape. I don't know the exact number though. They headed to the House of Love and Mercy. Their escape was a success. Except for one unlucky child, they were able to get to the property of the House of Love. Except for one unlucky child, they were able to get to the property of the House of Love and Mercy. I guess the staff couldn't follow them into the other orphanage's property. In other words, the other facility's property had to be out of their jurisdiction. The staff were frustrated that kids got away from them, and they dragged the one they caught back here. I'm sure they wanted to bring back the others who got away from them too. I'm certain the staff were determined not to let a single one escape. It was easy to see that determination in the obstinate way they locked the place up after the event. But they were never able to bring back the ones that got away. No matter how much the staff were mortified, they couldn't reclaim the children and punish them. In other words, if you could make it to the House of Love and Mercy, then you could escape the evil clutches of this hell. On the other hand, the one they caught went through such misery afterwards, yet the exact details of how he was punished were never passed down. All that remains were ominous phrases left by those who knew him at the time. The drowned ducky. The mashed caterpillar. The splayed piggy. I can't even imagine what kind of punishments they were. The only thing I can say is that those punishments are supposed to be far more harsh than the casket punishment, which was the most cruel punishment I knew at the time. I can only imagine how horrible those punishments were from their ominous names. After that, the captured kid's wish came true, and he was able to leave the orphanage. He was able to leave this orphanage safely and enjoy his freedom while breathing in the fresh air under the blue sky. Well, according to the rumors, that wasn't what happened at all. While he was playing in the boiler room, he slipped and fell, injured his brain, and died. The children were instructed not to go into the boiler room after that incident. Everyone knew that the boiler room was always locked. So everyone knew he was killed, and not just that, he was killed after being tortured. He was killed to teach the other children that they would face hell on earth if they tried to escape. Yet those who faced that risk and made it out obtained ordinary average lives full of love and mercy's namesake, which were far better conditions than we lived in here. Shit, the writing can be a little the sentence structure is a little weird. Anyway, maybe the House of Love and Mercy really was heaven. Maybe all the orphanages are pretty much the same. But compared to my orphanage, I bet anything else would have been better. Even if someone escaped successfully, the police would catch him. Then he'd be sent back to the orphanage, which would be pretty much the same thing as being killed. However, if he could reach the House of Love and Mercy, they'd take him in. They wouldn't send him back. By talking about escaping to the House of Love and Mercy, we were trying to forget how cruel reality was to us. Then one day, the leader of our group, Eriko, said to us quietly, "Would you try to escape if you had a chance to?" Who didn't want to escape from here? It was a rather foolish question. That wasn't what she meant. If there was a chance to escape, would you take that chance knowing that you had to go through what you had to go through if you got caught? That was what she meant. Not one of us could answer immediately. If the previous escape incident was a total success, then we might have thought differently. But after that, the orphanage had tightened up security to prevent runaways. All the doors and windows were locked heavily, and it wouldn't be at all easy to get out. Even if another group escape was planned, the success rate would be very low. 3 escaped and 1 was caught before. Maybe 2 would be caught next time. No, maybe everyone would be. If I could, I'd want to escape. But the House of Love and Mercy is so far away. The bridge is so long, too. We'll all be caught before we get there. Besides, we can't even go outside. Everything is locked up. There were locks all over the orphanage. To escape, you need a key for both the inside and the outside, and after the lights were turned off, even each section of the hallway was individually locked. Make no mistake, this was a prison. According to the rumors, orphanages receive government funding depending on the number of children they house, so if anyone escapes, they lose money. Also, if we were to expose the conditions at the orphanage, they would end up being inspected, and things would get complicated for them. That was why they were so intent on keeping us locked up. Sure, if there was a chance, I would want to escape, but realistically, there's no way we could. Every door is locked. Well, did you know? The hen house in the courtyard uses the same key as the door to the back stairs. Huh? Really? Shh. Eriko shushed us. Sometimes mass-produced locks take the same key. Of course, most places use different types of locks so that this won't happen, but the staff at the orphanage must have overlooked it. So there were 2 locks that used the same key at the orphanage. However, most of us never had a chance to even touch the keys. But there were a few exceptions. One of those was the hen house. Each room group took turns taking care of different chores. If your group was assigned to clean the hen house, you'd have to get a key to it from the teacher's office. You were supposed to return the key immediately after you were done. But while taking care of the hen house, the key was in the children's hands. While the staff would occasionally come around to check, they couldn't keep an eye on us forever. Eriko, you aren't thinking about using that key, are you? Let's not. It's too dangerous. Of course it's dangerous if there's only one of us. But it's different if we're in a group. Wait, why? Do you know why only one kid was caught last time they tried to escape? They were desperate. And so to escape as a group, they did something. To increase the chances of a success. That was why only one of them was caught. But what did they do? They scattered as they ran. They dashed off in different directions. They waited until the day when there were only a few people working at the orphanage and ran this way and that. And so, although it all depended on luck, it would increase the chance of success for sure. On your own, you'd probably have no hope, but if the staff were to chase after other children, then your own chance of escaping successfully would increase. In other words, Eriko was inviting us to escape with her. The more children joined, the more each of our chances would increase. But among us, there were children who tattled to the staff for their own benefit. So she had to be very careful about who she talked to. Eriko must have trusted us a lot. Eriko, myself, Tomomi, and Kikuko, 4 children. Do any of you want to stay here a day longer? The 3 of us shook our heads, but at the same time we couldn't agree to escape with her either. Of course we don't want to stay here a day longer, or even an hour longer. Even if we did exactly the same thing as we did yesterday, we might get yelled at tomorrow. I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand living in fear of what to do and what not to do so I won't be yelled at. We all feel the same way. We could endure strict rules, but it was almost impossible to endure vague ones. It wasn't too much of a stretch to say that the rules depended on the mood of the staff. This is okay, that isn't okay. Such borderline rules change daily. And if we were to say anything about that, we would be treated horribly for it. I will escape even if I have to do it alone. Like I said, the more people that join, the better our chance. Think about it. If they find out about this henhouse key trick, they are sure to change the lock on the back door. In other words, we only have one chance. So even if you regret not joining in later, it'll be too late. But, oh, I'm scared. I'm scared too. If we get caught, we'll be killed. Tomomi and Kikuko weren't the only ones who felt afraid. The fear was perfectly understandable, because all of a sudden, the fear of the punishment that would follow had become very realistic. I'm sure Eriko felt the same way too, but her courage was suppressing her fear. And because of that, she shared her idea with us. So, do you plan to stay here forever? No way. I know you're scared, but this is the only chance we have. You have to be brave just this once. What about you, Miyoko? Don't you want to go with me? Unlike Tomomi and Kikuko, I wasn't trembling that much. Of course, I was scared in my own way, but compared to the other two, I must have appeared rather calm. Miyoko, can we really escape? Of course, Eriko couldn't guarantee a success, but I had to ask her anyway. There's no guarantee, but if you join me, I'll have a better chance of escaping than trying to run on my own. Of course, the same goes for you too. Eriko gave a calculated reason, but I'm sure she just wanted a friend to agree with her. That was probably more important to her than increasing her chances of escape. Tomomi, Kikuko, if you're too scared, then I won't force you. Miyoko and I will escape ourselves. 2 is enough. Well... Eriko rushed the 2 to make up their minds. It almost It almost looked cold, but that was her way of mustering their courage, because it was very possible that, regardless of the outcome of our escape attempt, as our roommates, those two would be held responsible. It's not like we'll do it tomorrow. Our turn to take care of the hen house is in a week. We'll wait for the perfect time to do it. If we don't feel that it's safe, then we'll wait until our next turn. We'll be very careful. The rotation of the staff and the timing were very important, but we also each had to know the way to the to the House of Love and Mercy. We were planning to split up, so we had to know the area. I made up my mind. Okay, I'm coming with you, but let's time our escape very carefully, okay? Of course. We'll be killed if we get caught. I don't want to die. I'll come too. Me too. Tomomi and Kikuko agreed, and so we all decided to escape as a group. We waited for the perfect opportunity. We waited for the day where only a few staff members were at the orphanage, and we decided to let God take care of the rest. Ah, it's open. Maybe it was the way I did it. Eriko tried to open the lock several times without success, but I got it open on the first attempt. The back door opened slowly, and we felt a cool breeze. This wasn't the world of freedom just yet. In fact, it was the exact opposite. If the staff were to find out we were here, we would be in big trouble. It was a world of danger. But unless we went through that dangerous world, we wouldn't be able to go any further.
Yoshi. Ikuyo.
I think Eriko wanted to say that. We were planning to leave with that as our cue. But what we heard instead wasn't Eriko's voice. We started to run. It was raining. We all got soaked immediately and our clothes stuck to our skin. While that would normally be very uncomfortable, we couldn't even stop thinking about that. We could only keep running in the rain. We were dashing on gravel, but it felt more like trudging through a muddy rice field. My feet kept sinking and I couldn't pull them up. I was frustrated because no matter how fast I tried to run, I wasn't gaining any speed. Felt a sense of urgency. I heard someone yelling, "Escape," behind me, and all I could do was run like crazy. Okay, everyone go in different directions. Oh. Yeah, everyone go in different directions. With Eriko's cue, we all went different ways, hoping they wouldn't be coming after us. Would we be able to reunite safely at the House of Love and Mercy? All four of us were there together. All four of us there together. Or maybe someone would be missing. No. Maybe everyone else would make it, and I'd be the one who gets caught. My thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a staff member coming behind me. The staff members should have numbered fewer than us. So if I was lucky, they wouldn't be coming after me. Praying that the staff voices I heard in the distance weren't after me, I looked back for a moment. If I had time to turn around, why didn't I take another step forward? Why didn't I try to escape further? As I turned around, I felt a huge hand cover my face. Its pinky finger slipped into my open mouth. The hand grabbed my face, shoved me into the muddy gravel. Of course I didn't stay quiet. I fought back. And then I saw his face. It was the scariest face I'd ever seen. I realized it immediately. He only wanted to capture me alive to use me as an example. And considering what would happen to me afterwards, killing me here on the spot wouldn't pose any problem, would it? Yes, he looked at me with unworldly hate, ready to end my life here and now. His pinky finger ended up touching my tongue. The indescribably nasty taste sent an icky feeling through my whole body. Ah, that's it. This is what my murder tasted like. This is what my murder tastes like? He was going to shove that finger down my windpipe and suffocate me. And so, in order to live, I fought back the only way I could. Something warm filled my mouth. It felt like swallowing blood after a nosebleed. I spit it from my mouth and ran without turning around, leaving behind the staff member clutching his pinky finger. I heard his roars echoing behind me. It wasn't a man that was after me. It was a beast. He had no interest in capturing me. His only goal was to see me dead. My shoes had slipped off. They weren't sneakers, so they came off easily while I was running like mad. My bare feet struck on the gravel over and over. It was painful, but I didn't care, because if I stopped, I knew what would happen to me. Tree branches cut my face and barbed wires scratched my thighs. My feet and toes were bloody from running on gravel. The blood from the staff member's pinky finger dripped down from my mouth, staining my chin and chest. I was running for my life with scratches and cuts all over my body. If I were to get caught, I would be killed. If my pursuers had any sense, then I would be killed after being tortured. But if he didn't, I would be killed on the spot. I didn't want to be killed. I don't want to be killed. My lungs and heart were about to explode. My mind was blank from fear and lack of oxygen. I was about to lose consciousness. I might have given in if I didn't hear the voice of a staff member coming after me. My knees were shaking. My legs wouldn't move properly. I felt like I was going to fall like a puppet with its strings cut. But I couldn't fall. I couldn't fall just yet. It was too late. My face had hit the gravel. I felt the awful sensation of falling, and immediately after the roar of the beast coming from behind me. I must have hit my thigh against the steering wheel when I jumped. I can feel the throbbing pain delayed slightly. I'm sweating all over. I wiped the sweat on my forehead and put my hand on my chest, only then realizing how fast my heart was beating. I rubbed my thigh. I rubbed it in the straight line. That's not where I hit the steering wheel, but I feel like this is where it hurts. I can't see a scary beast in a moonlit car. I have my shoes on, and I'm not covered in blood. My feet are fine too. Someone knocked on the window, startling me.
サンサ、時間です。
ありがとう。
I wanted to take a nap, so I told him to come wake me up in an hour. Maybe an hour was too long. Too long a nap actually makes you tired. I put my seat back up and got out of the car. The cool breeze feels good on my skin. I only see the moon and nothing else. There's nothing else to see on this mountain trail. My car and a command vehicle disguised as a trailer are parked on the side of the street. I can still feel that bad taste in my mouth. I spat it out on the side of the street, but even that couldn't get rid of it. The taste of blood and saliva and rain. Sweat from my forehead and the raindrops got into my mouth, but I couldn't swallow, so I ended up drooling. That sensation around my lips brought back memories, and I tried to wipe my mouth. Maybe I'm nervous. That's why it's such a bad dream. I think there's a coffee machine in the command vehicle. We just double check real quick. This is a new background, I'm pretty sure. And the console version. An unpleasant cup of coffee will wake me up.
どう？何か動きは？
いえ、何も。先ほどジーチから定期連絡が。問題なしとのことです。
そう。ねえ、どなたかコーヒーを入れてくださらない？
はい。ミルクと砂糖は？
ミルクだけ。あ、やっぱり砂糖も入れてくださる。
I still have a bad taste in my mouth. The feeling of biting and crushing his little finger and his filthy blood filling my mouth. I'm sure a sweeter cup of coffee will wash down that bad taste and also wake me up from my nightmare completely. So this is occurring at the very end of the last chapter. When this is already past the Watanagashi, it seems. So yeah, there's no tips in this chapter as far as I know. There's nothing. They made a menu for it, which is interesting. And it's completely different, actually. There is no console BGs for this. Interesting. Anyway, let's save again. And let's check out chapter 2.
はい、バンケットより後方。スピーチあと一人で乾杯に入ります。準備できてるね。
後方 OK です。内部全然聞こえないんで、スピーチが終わるタイミングでコールをお願いします。
いいかい。各宅にビールは10本ずつだよ。ちゃんと自分の縄張りにスムーズに運んでね。
Young hotel workers dressed smartly in bow ties pulled bottle after bottle out of the beer cases, preparing for the toast. They waited for their cue to serve drinks while listening through the intercom. At a normal party, they would put bottles of beer on the table ahead of time, but if there was a lecture before the party, then they couldn't. Guests don't mind sushi going dry due to a long speech, but they don't like seeing their tables get wet with condensation from the bottles of beer. And more than anything, they certainly don't want to drink warm beer. That's why beer has to be served right before a toast. However, there's always a speech before a toast, usually a long one. Especially at a big party like this, there are lots of guests that give speeches, so it's extremely difficult to know when to serve. For that reason, the bottles ended up sitting outside by the banquet room, and people ended up drinking warm beer anyway. There were several dozen tables with white tablecloths on them in the banquet room. Approximately 8 people were sitting at each table, so there were at least a few hundred people in the room. The banquet room was filled with excitement. There were many plates with many different kinds of food on each table. A sushi platter, a sashimi platter, a fruit platter. Also along the wall, there were cooks ready to serve fresh sashimi. All the guests appeared to be well-mannered gentlemen and were clearly notable people in various different fields. The huge and beautiful chandelier above them clearly indicated that this hotel had a status good enough for these famous people. An elderly gentleman was giving a lengthy speech on stage before making a toast. Usually people don't like such long speeches, especially if it's before a toast. But the guests occasionally shouted yes, yes, and sometimes they gave him a loud applause, filling the room with their fervor. Well, maybe fervor was a pleasant way to put it. It was probably more accurate to say that their excitement was bizarre.
自分の国の国旗に敬意を示すなという教育をしている国が世界中のどこにあるというんですか。ないよ。そんな国、日本だけなんです。そんなおかしい教育をしているのは。
そうだそうだ。
国旗や国家を強制されることは心の自由への強制？バカ言っちゃいけない。いいですか？国旗や国家を愛するというのはですね、自分を知り、郷土を知り、歴史や国家を学ぶ。そうしていく中で自然に自らが日本人であることを自覚していき、日本社会の一員を担う国民としての役割を理解していく。その結果、自然と湧いてくるのが国を愛するという心なんです。ところが反日教師どもはそれを軍国主義の洗脳だとこう言っている。バカ言っちゃいけない。そう言ってる連中がやってることは何ですか。これから日本を背負っていく子供たちに反日妄想をすり込み、自虐教育で洗脳している。日本は恥ずべき国で、貴様らはその国に生まれた恥ずべき人間であると。国家をないがしろにし、自分の生まれた国を否定せよと、そんなことを吹き込んでいるわけです。無垢な子供たちはそれをそのまま鵜呑みにし、何の裏付けもなく信じてしまう。そりゃあ当たり前です。学校は学ぶところなんですよ。そこで教師がそうだと教えれば、子供たちは何の疑いもなく信じるんです。こんな卑劣な話がありますか。今こそ日本の教育を私たちは体を張って守らなければならない時なのです。
The sound of applause filled the banquet room. All the gentlemen agreed and expressed that they felt the same way by cheering him on. After that, a gentleman wearing a cloth sash approached the stage. The hall welcomed him onto the stage with another round of thunderous applause. A rousing theme from a popular drama series played as he took the stage, but it was entirely unnecessary before the overwhelming applause. The man's sash carried his name written in large letters, along with the name of the prefecture he was running for office in.
夕刻の同志丸山〇〇くんを皆さんにご紹介いたします。彼丸山くんは長年前知事の下で知事室長を務め、その懐刀として長いこと県政を支えてまいりました。この度前知事が高齢により勇退を決意され、その後任として指名されたのがここにいる丸山くんなのであります。
私の県にも実に悔しいことに反日教師が何人もおります。教育の自由、心の自由などと謳いながら子供たちに反日教育をシャーシャーと強いている。正しい歴史を伝えず、連中お得意の捏造と歪曲で日本大東亜共栄圏の真の意味やアジアを白人支配から解放しようとアジア各国のために血を流してくださった勇士たちのことは伝えようともしない。戦前どれだけのアジアの国が白人植民地であったか、そして日本がアジア解放に立ち上がり戦後どれだけの国が自治を回復したか、その意味すらも伝えようともしない。情けない。そんな連中が真剣に教育を考える教師たちの中に混じり込み、神聖な学者を汚し続けていることにはもう我慢がなりません。私丸山〇〇は県知事に就任し、そういったクズのもを全て通用し、県の教育を正し、日本の将来を担うことができる健全な若者たちを育てることができる環境を取り戻すことで、日本再生100年の経営の礎を築いていく覚悟であります。
彼丸山〇〇くんは来年の県知事選挙に立候補いたします。どうか皆さん温かい応援とみなぎるお力で彼
丸山〇〇日本の教育を正してまいります。どうかよろしくお願いいたします。
Again, the banquet room filled with applause. The man was receiving a standing ovation. I need to explain a bit about this banquet before you misunderstand. It wasn't the conference of a political association or a lecture by a political candidate. It's by Tokyo. It was hard to believe, but this was nothing more than the meeting of college alumni's association. Everyone should be familiar with what those are. Okay, a college reunion? Whether it's elementary, junior, or high school or college, once you graduate from one of those, you normally belong to an organization of alumni. You receive invitations for reunions where you enjoy talking about the good old days. However, there are many different types of such organizations. Some are simple, and some are united with much tighter bonds. And once an organization becomes united with those type bonds, it's no longer a simple organization of alumni. Rather, it becomes a significant faction known as an alma mater clique. In Japanese society, it's traditional for graduates to form tighter bonds that go beyond the level of an organization. Also, the more superior the alma mater, the stronger that tendency holds true. The Imperial University, one of the best universities in the country, is famous for the deep bonds its graduates form. Why do superior people like to bond? It may be because they take pride in being superior, but more than that, maintaining connections is the most significant reason. All the Imperial University graduates are elites in their respective fields. They are likely to succeed and become important people. When they do, the unity of their alumni association gains immeasurable meaning. In fact, even today, the Imperial University graduates maintain their tight academic clique, and they hold a great influence throughout many different fields. They interact with other universities as well, so the graduates' bonds are extremely tight even today. Additionally, while Imperial University usually refers to the University of Tokyo, sometimes it's used to mean all 7 major universities in Japan. They are located near Tokyo, Kyoto, Tohoku, Kyushu, Hokkaido, Osaka, and Nagoya. They are all great schools. There happens to be an organization of alumni that includes all of those 7 universities. The elderly gentlemen in this banquet room were each from those organizations. However, not every graduate would get an invitation here automatically. It is a society of selected gentlemen, and in order to become a member, one must first fulfill several conditions, such as recommendation from an existing member, contribution to the society, possession of status, and so forth. Therefore, all of the members are important people from different fields, and obviously the power of this organization is of a political nature. But there's one more very important criterion one has to meet to join. Strong patriotism, a heart that longs to contribute to Japan and its rebirth. As a result, this organization has become extremely nationalistic. Upon the stage, the candidate for the prefectural governorship was still talking passionately. And among those elderly gentlemen in the crowd, Takano can be found. Takano seemed used to this kind of conference, and seemed unsurprised at anything that was being said, but at the same time, she looked rather fed up with it. And as she was in attendance, she must have been one of their members. Which meant that she possessed not only an extremely excellent academic background, but that the older gentleman here had acknowledged her equivalent contributions to society, and that she possessed strong patriotism. However, her academic background was the only qualification she had met to join. She was only able to join as a special case because of her connections. She didn't even hold prejudiced ideas like the other members did. So why was she here today? Probably because of the same reason as the man giving the speech up on stage. The man on the stage didn't actually have prejudiced ideas, much like Takano. He only prepared a speech that he knew the guests would like. Politicians only want votes. Each and every person has a vote, but appealing to each one of them takes too long. So the most efficient way is to appeal to organizations with a unified idea and a unified will. In other words, this man was giving his speech so he can garner support from those powerful people. The elderly gentlemen in the banquet room will then do their best to support him, since he appears to share their ideals. They can offer many different kinds of expediency, support, and assistance. To an outrageous degree, I might add. If the day's events continued in the same way, the organization would likely decide to officially support him. They will probably give him a great deal of financial aid. They'll assist him in different ways as well. Of course, the man on the stage won't be the only one gaining something. When he wins the election and becomes a governor next year, the organization will welcome the governor as a new member and gain more political influence. And eventually, the organization will become so powerful that nobody can ignore it. Those of you reading this right now probably get the sense that they're no mere alumni association. It'd be absolutely right. After reaching this level, they were a fine syndicate. No, they would be a secret society if the group wasn't so open about its activities. Now, I'm sure some of you readers are brushing this off, thinking there's no way such a suspicious organization could exist in Japan. But everything I've explained is entirely true. There are several such influential groups and organizations within our society, and you need to understand that they hold powerful political clout and influence our national policies. Some are alma mater cliques, like the one I've described above. Others are scientific societies serving different parties, industrial groups, advisory committees, religious organizations, community service groups, and so forth. Also, there are right-wing and left-wings, the hawk and the dove. I won't go listing their specific names here, yet you've probably read them every now and then in your average newspaper. In Japan, the terms for such forces aren't very common. Most of your readers probably think of a suspicious organization wearing white hoods when you hear the phrase secret society and laugh it off. But unfortunately, that's a huge mistake. In America, where there's far more territory and citizens, there's way more groups like that, and they possess such vast influence that ignoring them is impossible. So the terms they use for such forces doesn't apply to those on the scale of the syndicate. Sometimes people say that such groups have more power than the White House, and they're referred to as the shadow government. Even here in Japan, we have a shadow government before the war, our zaibatsu. After we lost the war, the GHQ dismantled those blocks, but 40 years have passed since then. There's no guarantee our country hasn't given birth to another shadow government, given how good we are at collusion, groundwork, and backroom deals. Mio Takano was in fact attending a conference of such a shadow government. Okay, so I knew it. So it is a shadow government force, and this is Tokyo, right? Whose name we know now. It might appear to be a guest house at a huge golf course. There were no golfers in sight, but by appearance that must be it. But appearances can be deceiving. This wasn't a golf course, but a huge backyard. The guest house was in fact a very stylish mansion. Normal people would be surprised to learn that this was a private residence. The interior of the building was as lavish as the exterior. There were beautiful carpets on every floor, expensive-looking decorations on the wall, and expensive-looking bottles of alcohol on the shelves. And speaking of, here's the background. And the console version. which looks completely different. That's the kind of room Takano was in. There was a knock at the door, and an old man in a wheelchair and a young woman pushing it entered. As Takano stood up to bow, the old man stopped her by raising his right hand.
畳んでも久しぶりだの。いつでも遊びに来なさいと言っとるのに。
そのお言葉だけで光栄ですわ、小泉先生。
The old man sat on the sofa with assistance from the woman. He was very old, his face was covered in wrinkles, and he could hardly do anything on his own. Even so, he still held a great deal of power and influence.
相変わらずお盛んですわね。首筋、口紅がついておりますわよ。
ほっ、それ本当かね。やれやれ、これはお恥ずかしいの。
There was no lipstick on his neck. The woman who was helping him with his wheelchair was too beautiful to be a mere helper, so Takano had suspected something. As it turned out, her guess was correct. Although he was so old that he could die the next day, he wanted to stay sexually active until the very end. Even the Grim Reaper would think that's just
みお
absurd.
ちゃんもいつの間にかすっかり美人さんに成長したの。いつまでも小さいと思っとったらいつの間にの。
ご冗談を。本当にそう思われていたら、私のお尻を撫でようなんてなさいませんわ。
老い先短い年寄りに触らせても減るもんではないに。
私よりももっと柔らかいお尻を散々撫でておいでのくせに。
Takano and the old man enjoyed a tasteless conversation. They had clearly known each other a long time, and they were very close. The young woman came back in to serve tea. After she left, the old man started to speak.
しかし、みおちゃんは本当に立派な子だの。高野くんもこれほど立派に育ってくれて、きっとあの世で鼻高々だろうな。
そうであればいいのですが、祖父の偉業には私など足元にも及びません。
高野くんもいろいろと運がなかった。時代にも恵まれんかった。もし何もない時代に研究をしておったなら、あんたに引き継がせることもなく、見事研究を完成させておっただろうの。
ですが、そういう時代だったからこそ、皮肉にも祖父はひなみ沢症候群の存在に気づくことができました。
The world today is in the nuclear era. With America and the Soviet Union glaring at each other over mounds of nuclear stockpiles, it takes nukes to have authority as a major power. Yet we forever abandoned our nukes thanks to our 3 anti-nuclear principles. In this age, we are now a nation without nukes. How deplorable. In the middle of the 20th century, despite rising tensions between East and West, there was a temporary peace known as the Cold War brought by a balance of nuclear weapons pointed at one another. Permanent memberships in the United Nations were monopolized by nations with nuclear arms. They secured their predominance with nuclear weapons, bound the world with nuclear non-proliferation treaties, eternally banning non-nuclear nations from the world stage. For Japan to become a nation that can compete with the world, it must develop nuclear arms or something as powerful. That's what the people believed, at least. Realistically, Japan will never arm itself with nuclear weapons. I know. The citizens won't accept it. Even if the government ignored their opinions and armed itself with nuclear weapons, it wouldn't work. By abandoning nuclear weaponry, Japan gained the deterrent power of the United States, though some people thought the only way for Japan to become equal to the United States would be to get nuclear arms of their own. But realistically, that was impossible. So we really are going the whole, let's develop the Hinamizawa syndrome shit, so we can try to monopolize that or sell that as a weapon or use that for power. It's like, you've got nukes, we've got something that will make all your citizens claw their throats out. Okay. Even if Japan armed itself with nuclear weapons, that wouldn't automatically let Japan join the great powers. Takano and the old man discussed the balance of nuclear power in the world. Eventually, the sound of the cuckoo clock reminded them to return to the main subject at hand. The old man pointed to the attaché case that had been sitting next to Takano. Takano nodded at once, opened it up, and removed the contents. There were brand new bills packed in it. How much was actually in there? A bundle of brand new million yen bills is 1 centimeter, so there must have been at least enough to make up 8 digits. Oh my god. There were also 2 more attaché cases by her side. However, neither Takano or the old man were surprised at all. Takano closed the case and bowed.
ありがとうございます、先生。このご恩は忘れません。
金は人生の長い若者が持つべきだの。年寄りがあの世まで持っていくもんじゃない。金はあるだけものを言うが、現金はさらにものを言う。大事に使いなさい。
もちろんですわ。祖父の夢を実現するためだけに使います。
高野くんが羨ましいの。良いお孫さんを持たれた。きっとあの世であんたを自慢しているだろうの。
まだ自慢されるようなことは何もしていません。祖父の研究を完成させた時初めて、私は祖父に褒めてもらえる資格が得られるのだと思います。
本当に羨ましい。うちのせがれたちは全然ダメだ。金儲けのことしか頭にない。金は儲けてからが大切なんだ。その儲けた金でお国のために何を貢献できるかが大切なんだ。それこそが今日まで自分を育んでくれたお国へのご恩返しっちゅうもんなんだがの。
あら、たくさんの愛人たちに気前よくおごるのもお国へのご恩返しなんですね。
もちろんだとも。あいつらが買い物をすれば金は巡ってお国に戻る。金は天下の回り物だ。
However, those lovers would probably end up buying some foreign goods. Things probably don't work quite the way this old man thinks they do. Takano chuckled to herself.
女どもにばらまく金とミオちゃんに託す金は意味が全く違う。
存じております。
ミオちゃんは今日までよく頑張ってきた。礼を尽くし、大勢の人たちの信用と支持を取り付けた。今だから話すが、春山くんも望月くんも最初は君のことを若すぎると批判的だったんだがね。だから私もミオちゃんのその努力を認めてその金を託すんだ。はい。そしてな、その金を私が託すつうことはの、私がミオちゃんを高野くんの研究の正式な後継者だと認めたということなんだ。
ありがとうございます。私ごとき若輩に委ねてくださったことに深く感謝いたします。
いやいや、これは高野くんと君の研究だ。彼もミオちゃん以外が引き継ぐことを望まなかっただろうの。だからミオちゃんがここまで上り詰めたおかげで他の年寄りたちをより説得しやすかったわけだ。
祖父の完成できなかった研究を私が完成させることだけが私ができる祖父への唯一の恩返しですから、そのために求められる努力ならばいといません。
Takano smiled as she remembered everything she had to go through to get to this point. It went without saying, but the old man around Takano saw her as someone from their grandchildren's generation, or maybe even younger. Just how much trouble did Takano have to endure in order to gain the trust of those with such a large generational gap? It was hard to describe to those who couldn't even imagine her trouble. But Takano earned it. She gathered allies, drove away enemies, garnered support, and forced them to recognize her. She spent a long time establishing trust and rising to a status that the old men would welcome. Which was all the more reason this meeting was a reward for her many days of hardship. Now that she officially had a powerful influence backing her, she could spread her wings and see the completion of her grandfather's unfinished research.
さて、高野くんの研究を正式に引き継ぐことになったなら、ミオちゃんにも話しておかなきゃならんことがある。
何でしょう、伺います。
The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on the table. Takano lit it for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing that the old man did, she kept the lighter in her pocket. The constant buildup of gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano noticed that Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Takano noticed the Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Yes, according to my grandfather's journal, around 1940, he learned that many soldiers from Hinamizawa, sent from Hinamizawa to the Kwangtung army expressed terminal symptoms, which led him to surmise that an unknown infectious parasite dwelled in Hinamizawa. Under the harsh conditions of war, people sometimes lost their mind. In those conditions, those who were sent to a far-off battlefield from Hinamizawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated, and caused twisted incidents. Yet all that occurred in the existence of chaos of the battlefield. Every incident was handled separately, and no one suspected there was an underlying cause. Do you believe madness can bloom on the battlefield?
当時高野君は軍医少佐として海外に派兵されていて、現地の貿易研究所で各種伝染病の予防対策について研究していた。そんな中で偶然いくつかの錯乱事件が全て同じ出身地の兵士によって起こされていることを知った。高野君は南沢出身者に特有の症状ではないかと仮定し、個人的にこの研究を始めたのだ。そして南沢出身の兵士を研究所勤務にして集め、いろいろと調査した。そして南沢独特のお社様信仰の存在を知り、特異な性質を持つ未知の疾病の存在を確信したのだ。
Some may wonder how we could be so certain that these symptoms were caused by unusual parasites. At the beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved that some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the time, it wasn't too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. For instance, in modern times it's been revealed that beriberi is caused by vitamin B1 deficiency, but at the start of the 20th century, many loudly proclaimed that it was the work of an unidentified pathogen.
祖父はその研究が軍にとって価値のあるものになるのではないかと予想し、予算を求めましたが、一生に付されたとか。
True, and this happens a lot with just various forms of medicine. For example, a lot of candy that exists today used to be medicine back in the day. Like stuff that would normally be used for pastries nowadays, like say gingerbread, was a medicinal, compound in the past. Because, like, apparently, I mean, I've never had it, but apparently raw gingerbread tastes like ass. Like, it tastes really fucking bad. But apparently that was medicinal. Chocolate milk was also considered to be medicinal back in the day. Like, if you were feeling sick, you would drink chocolate milk. Stuff like that, which is why a lot of, like, candies kind of taste like medicine. Like grape flavors or banana flavors and the like, they kind of taste kind of off. And that's kind of why. But again, like back in the day, people thought, okay, if you have this, try eating this. And then as time went on, they kind of realized, oh, it's actually being caused by this, or your lack of this, or you have this, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Hinamizawa syndrome. No, the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions. Even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one had explained before him, he was unable to convince others of that achievement, and spent his life alone, unable to garner support and unable to achieve proper recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limits. Talented people, funding, and backup. A research project can be successful only if all of those things are present. Takano had noticed her grandfather's mistakes, and that's why she did everything she could to obtain all of that.
当時の上層部は即効性でしかも普遍性の高い治療薬を期待していた。高野君の研究は非常に興味深いものではあっても、当時の軍には期待されなかったということだの。
ですが、先生は唯一祖父の研究に理解を示してくれたと聞いています。祖父は先生のことを無二の親友と記していました。
高野君とは同郷だった。同じ蕎麦屋を知る人間と遠方の戦地で会えるというのは奇跡的なことだったの。 彼とは年は離れていたが、私たちは固い友情で結ばれていたのだ。だから高野君からはよく話をされたの。画期的な研究になるに違いない。本格的な研究のために予算をつけられるよう根回ししてほしいと。
祖父の手記にも先生がいろいろと各方面に掛け合ってくださったことが記されています。結局祖父の研究が認められることはありませんでしたが、先生だけが理解者でいてくれたことはきっと存命中大きな心の支えになっていたものと思います。
だが結局は何の力にもなれんかった。だから高野君にしてやれなかった協力をみおちゃんにするんだ。みおちゃんに協力するのは高野君に。
ありがとうございます。祖父は良い親友に恵まれたと思っています。
Accidentally skipped it twice. God damn it.
軍上層部に先生のように理解を示してくれる方が少しでもいてくれたなら、祖父の人生はもっと違ったものになっていたかもしれないと思うと、とても悔しく思います。
The old man closed his eyes and paused for a moment. Shortly after that, he looked into the distance and spoke.
真実はそうではない。上層部は高野君の発見に少なからず関心を持っていたのだ。
それは初耳です。でもそれならなぜ祖父の研究を認めなかったのですか？
ある事情により高野君にひなみ沢症候群を研究させたくない都合ができたのだ。その理由は私と一部の高級将校しか知らん。私を除き全員が他界した今、高野君の後を継ぐみおちゃんには話しておこうと思う。
研究させたくない都合とは何ですか
Takano had believed until this day that her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it had never gained any recognition. Her grandfather had asked the military for funding so he could uncover the secret of Hinamizawa syndrome during the war. But just like the old man had said earlier, the military wanted an instant-acting weapon. That's why they weren't interested in this research. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military had actually shown an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kwangtung Army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kwangtung Army was stationed in Manchuria, options were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union or advancing south to expand our territory and secure resources. With the Soviet Union and its predecessor Russia being a landlocked frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that would freeze over in the winter. And they had made numerous attempts to expand their territory southward too. Those expansionist policies were said to be the cause of the Russo-Japanese War. In the history books, it is said that Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. Both sides had simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. It wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. As a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to smolder. Later, the Russian Empire was overthrown by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. Yeah, in case you didn't know, because a lot of people kind of forget about this, I won't go too much into it, but just know that when during the Great Wars, Japan expanded a lot, and I mean a lot. They were a tiny island nation. They fucking just started moving west. They started moving westward, and they kind of just started conquering everything, which is crazy. It's crazy to believe, right? They literally conquered most of China, they conquered most of Korea, and they started expanding northward as well to Russia. And they went to war with Russia during the Great Wars. Eventually, of course, that's when the US stepped in shortly after, and then Japan had to basically retreat all of their troops from Asia. But otherwise, they would have conquered China, Korea, you know, Southeast Asia. They would have conquered all of that if they were not forced to return all of those lands to who they belong to. So it's pretty fucking crazy. We would have had a completely different outcome, or the world would look completely different had Japan been allowed to keep all the stuff that they kind of took during the war. But anyway, according to history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned their northern advance. As a result, when the Great Patriotic War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on their German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans had managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive that reversed the tides of war. Even with the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, the Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that threat, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the Far East, and they weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. For starters, the Soviets had forged the Germany-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, too. Yet Germany broke the treaty and attacked the Soviet Union. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany had forged a military alliance. With all those factors in play, the Soviets naturally couldn't trust Japan to uphold their neutrality pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. Exactly. I don't think YouTube will let me read that name out loud, but exactly. The Austrian painter signed the tripartite pact because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets' other front in check. Let me double check for this pronunciation. Tripartite. Okay. Yeah, so the Tripartite Pact. But ultimately, Japan abandoned the North. With a superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. However, that plan was exposed to Sorge, and the Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from their far east border to the German front. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. It was a turning point in history, huh? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in 1940, the Kwangtung Army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan had earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the Nomonhan incident in 1941, after several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps that led to great losses. The Kwangtung Army realized they shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan toward the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. But at the very least, up until the Nomonhan incident, the Kwangtung Army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, there were also voices advising caution, suggesting we should avoid all-out war with China in order to shore up our forces against the Soviets. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? In July 1937, the Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other across the long... God damn it, dude, we're getting a history lesson in my visual novel? It's okay. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training, and they engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Yes, according to the historical records, that incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War, but with opinions divided on advancing north or south, the army was equally divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. No, in fact, we even received orders from General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew much bigger. So those supporting the northern advance wanted to settle the Battle of the Lungo Bridge quietly, insisting that the conflict with China was pointless in light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the southern advance used this incident to cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the Marco Polo Bridge incident became the trigger for Japan and China to enter all-out war. After that, and their bitter struggles in the Nomonhan incident, Japan greatly revised their Soviet strategy. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and secured the route for their southern advance. Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. If the Marco Polo Bridge incident hadn't happened, it's possible that history would have gone very differently. Maybe we wouldn't have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, if the South faction didn't get that chance, the military authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between the East and West. And maybe Germany could have invaded Moscow. then Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won the war if it had succeeded and taken Moscow. England was keeping its strength on the other side of the Dover Strait after all, and the United States was poised to enter the conflict. Besides, Napoleon once occupied Moscow, but in the end he couldn't beat their winter and had to withdraw. It's one of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. Yes, it's possible that the gunshot from the Marco Polo Bridge incident changed the tide of history. Both sides had different opinions on who fired the shot, right? According to the Japanese side, a Chinese soldier fired the shot at the Japanese soldier who got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese side claimed that the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military. But the shot was fired. Even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger, it sparked the Sino-Japanese War. Yes, that's what the history books say. But, Koizumi-sensei, what does that have to do with my grandfather? Finally. In the Marco Polo Bridge incident, a shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. The soldier came back later, and it was said that he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that the soldier was from Hinamizawa? Oh my god. Huh? Really? When Takano was talking about Hinamizawa syndrome, he said that the soldiers from Hinamizawa could suddenly, You're fucking telling me that one of the major, how to word it, you're telling me that one of the most important moments in World War II history was caused by someone from Hinamizawa? Are you fucking shitting me? And we realized that the soldier from the Marco Polo incident was in fact from Hinamizawa. Fuck you. And then what about the shot? No, what about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth, but I think it's possible that a soldier with the terminal stage of Hinamizawa syndrome fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident. Since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed that the Chinese army had fired at them and negotiated with that in mind. Just a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology from the Chinese and, as a show of force, dispatched 3 divisions of reinforcements. The Chinese side was of course opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into Hinamizawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing that political gray zone, they rejected Takano-kun's research. Right. So it was all for political reasons. Literally. For political reasons, that's why we never got more research into Hinamizawa syndrome. And that's why, well, all this shit happened. Incredible. Anyway.
そのため、この時代になってもなお、祖父の研究が顧みられることがなかったと。
そうだ。
The war is now over, but there are still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition.
高野君にその気はなくとも、hinamizawa症候群の研究が公になれば、社会的な影響が強すぎて、一般大衆に不要の混乱と疑念を与えることにもなりかねない。そう危惧した重鎮たちが、今日に至るまで高野君の研究を黙殺するよう根回しをしておったのは、今私も高野君に協力しないよう長く釘を刺されておった。
Takano tried to remain calm, but she couldn't stop herself from grimacing. She had just found out that the real reason why her grandfather's research had been ignored, it was because of secret maneuvers by political masterminds. If those masterminds feared it so much, ironically, that meant they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated to no end by her grandfather's lonely
だが
life.
そういう連中は高いし、もう当時を知る者は私しかおらん。もし今まだ高野君が生きていたなら、私はそれを誤って全面的な協力を申し出るつもりだった。だが彼はもういない。だから私はミオちゃんに謝り、高野君にするはずだった協力を君にしようと思っているのだ。
よろしいのですか？私がhinamizawa症候群の研究をすることで蒸し返しになるということはありませんか？
もう当時とは時代が違う。それに ひなみ沢症候群の研究には単なる風土病では済まされないものが潜んでおる。研究によっては医学の名前がつくあらゆる学会がひっくり返るような大発見になるかもしれん。
当時とはもう風向きが変わったということですわね。
そうだ。不幸にも高野君は風向きが変わるまで存命することができなかった。だが幸いみおちゃんという後継者に研究を託せた。だから私はこの命ある限り私は高野君に協力を約束したのに、さまざまなしがらみから力になれず彼を失望させた。その償いを命ある限りしていこう。それが高野君が無二の親友と呼んでくれた私のこの世に残された最後の仕事だと思っとる。
先生、本当にありがとうございます。
いや、いい。私も死ぬ前に洗いざらいを話せてすっきりした。とにかく私の目が黒いうちはみおちゃんの研究に一切の不自由はさせん。何かあったらいつでも頼りなさい。助力は惜しまないからの。
Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. But thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that, a far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her.
そういうことだ。私が言いたいのはつまり、ひなみ沢症候群には歴史すらも作りかねない魔力が宿っているということだ。それは日本社会すらもねじ曲げかねない。そこのところをよく肝に銘じて慎重に研究をしなさい。
After the proprietor finished serving the food, she bowed and left. The room was very tastefully put together, reminding them of a tea ceremony room. While it was sparsely decorated, quite a bit of money had obviously gone into it. So here we go. It's a typical classic Japanese style room. And here's the console version. Here it does look more like a tea room, that's for sure. That phone is kind of cool though. It's got its own little cushion. There was a very famous Japanese restaurant where many high-up officials and other important people held secret meetings. Takano was there, accompanied by about 5 gentlemen. She was sitting slightly further away from the men. They were clearly in a much more important position than she was. One of the men, wearing an expensive double-breasted suit, told Takano not to be so nervous.
今回の件、非常に興味深く読ませていただきました。このような研究が数十年にわたり眠り続けてきたとは。
ああ、驚きです。旧日本軍が戦時中に行っていた BC 兵器の研究はほとんどが実らず、研究基礎もすべて米軍に接収され、何も残っていないと思っておりましたよ。
この研究は軍上層部にもほとんど相手にされなかったと聞いております。
なるほど。ゆえに誰にも知られず、そして GHQ の追及も受けなかったというわけですな。その意味においてだけは本当に幸運でした。
高野先生の研究を高野さんが引き継ぐとは面白い。これも因縁ですかな。まるであなたの体を借りて個人が研究を完成させようとしているかのようです。
本当にそうかもしれませんわね。私も奇妙な因縁を感じます。
Takano adored Takano Hifumi and called him grandfather, but she hadn't revealed that relationship to others. She realized it would be beneficial for people to think she was involving personal feelings in her continuing Dr. Takano's research. So publicly, she once had exchanges with Takano Hifumi, and after his death, discovered his research documents with his remains and chose to carry it on. At least that's how the story went.
それで先生方いかがでしょうか。
うん。いくつかの省庁がね、非常に強い関心を持ったよ。中川君が言うには、防衛庁の技術研究本部が強い関心を示してくれてね、研究のスポンサーを名乗り出てくれた。
おお、それは朗報じゃないですか。おめでとう、高野さん。
ありがとうございます。
なんでも向こうが言うにはね。
There's a research council for next generation deterrence being led by experts from several different
こ
ministries.
の中でアルファベットプロジェクトというのがあるらしい。
What? Google is involved in this? Can you imagine if it was actually Google? It's probably just a name. I don't think Google. When was Google founded? Like 1993, 1998, and this is set in 1980s. Whatever. We don't know exactly what year this is. We don't know when exactly this is taking place, but it's at least in the 80s.
高野さんはご存知ですかな？
There was no way she would know about something like that. But it was very possible for these nationalists to research something dangerous without citizens knowing about it. Society forms something like a web made of connections between people. People hold hands with other people who share the same ideas and end up knitting a net. Of course, some nets are well known, but there are some secret ones too. So there was no way of guessing just how the men at this meeting were connected. A society involving research into deterrent weapons for the next generation. The Alphabet Project. With those words, it was possible to imagine what that might entail. Deterrent weapons. That usually refers to nuclear technology. Weapons are normally used to destroy enemies. However, the general idea of deterrent weapons is very different. The assumption is that they won't actually be used against anyone. Nuclear weapons are largely used as a threat to prevent enemy invasion, or as a deterrent from anyone attacking whomever holds them. Both the US and Soviets possess a large stockpile of nuclear arms, keeping each other in check, but they will never actually use them. Because if they did, there'd be a nuclear war and both countries would be destroyed. So they're like a legendary weapon you never draw. Of course, that last resort only works because both sides have nuclear weapons. If one side lacks them, then they lose all military negotiation power. In other words, nations without nukes are powerless before nuclear-armed states. That can't be true. Japan abandoned nukes and it still functions as a nation today. Or so some people may think, but they're wrong. Japan abandoned nukes but lies under the nuclear umbrella by allying itself with America. That means the nation functions thanks to America's nukes. However, that also means we must resign ourselves to forever being a vassal of America. In order for Japan to escape that and become a powerful nation equal to America, it must possess its own deterrence arms and step out of that nuclear umbrella. That society must have been put together by experts who believe in that ideal. Given that, then even the name Alphabet Project makes sense. Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. However, weapons of mass destruction aren't always nuclear. They also include biological weapons and chemical weapons. Atomic, biological, chemical. The initials of these three words make up ABC. That's why weapons of mass destruction are sometimes called ABC weapons. I will go into weapons of mass destruction that don't belong to those three categories. ABC Alphabet. In other words, Alphabet Project must be a code for research into weapons of mass destruction. As it happened, this guess of Takano's was correct.
本来は日本が核武装をするのが正しいのです。戦後、平和国家として確立し、多大な国際貢献を果たした我が国は常任理事国入りを果たし、核武装してこそ初めて一人前の国家として認められる。それこそが戦後日本100年の悲願なのです。
さようです。だが現実には核不拡散条約により核は大国だけが独占。また国内世論は核アレルギーに染まり、内外からの締め付けで実現を不可能にしております。
生物化学兵器は別名貧者の核兵器とも呼ばれる。核を持てない小国はすでに熱心に研究を進めているという話です。
高野さん、誤解しないでくださいよ。この度の研究は細菌兵器の保有が目的ではありません。同種の兵器が他国によって国内に持ち込まれる危険性について事前に十分な対処を行うための研究です。自衛のための研究であることを誤解しないようにお願いいたしますよ。
はい、存じております。
Takano hated this Japanese tendency to make excuses, but she didn't let it show on her face. No matter what they said, they already saw the value in using the research toward biological weaponry. Of course. However, in truth, that was just an excuse as well. If they actually wanted to research biological weapons, then it would be much faster to research diseases like smallpox and anthrax, instead of an unidentified disease like Hinamizawa syndrome. So it wasn't actually correct to say the defense agency was interested in it as a biological weapon. In other words, Takano needed a powerful sponsor who could back her up with funding, personnel, and a facility to conduct her research. So she used her connections and turned to the old men behind the government and the economy, reaching out to each of them and getting them to forcibly pull funding out of the defense agency under the excuse of its application toward biological weaponry. That was the truth. Holy shit. Therefore, her project wasn't officially recognized by the defense agency. To be exact, the people who secretly controlled the defense agency were the ones who actually knew about it. These masterminds diverted funding from the defense agency to the Alphabet Project, and then they pushed for Takano's research to be a part of it. Takano gets her funding and the influencers get to drain public funds through kickbacks. Considering that, it was doubtful that this project was genuinely about researching the next generation of deterrent arms. It was probably just an excuse for the masterminds to funnel money into their own pockets. Well, those complicated matters don't matter to Takano. Whatever those old men and influencers were planning wasn't their business. As long as she could get the funding for her research, that was enough. Either way, Takano had found her sponsor. It was one of the biggest organizations around too. This had always been her grandfather's dream. Takano was trying to stay calm, but she was about to jump up and down with excitement.
中川君としては今回の件十分に研究が進んだら丸ごと買い取って構わないと言ってくれてる。まだまだ未完の研究だが、その将来性については十分に理解できてるようだ。
おっしゃる通りです。この研究はまだ道半ばで、十分な資金と施設、人材が。
それでだね、ここからが交渉になるんだが、向こうとしてはこの研究丸ごと抱えてしまいたいのが希望らしいんだ。こう言っちゃ悪いんだが、君一人に任せるには荷が重いと考えてる。
Hearing that put quite the damper on Takano's ecstasy.
私はお金が欲しくて研究しているのではありません。一人の研究者としての知的探求心からです。私に必要なのはスポンサー。先方が求めるのは成果。そういう関係に期待したかったのですが。
Takano realized she was talking rather breathlessly, so she tried to calm herself down. Either way, they'd be backing the research. Considering they're hoping for results that merit the budget, they probably feel that Takano's still too young to handle it.
分かってます分かってます。高野さんが今日まで積み上げてきた研究を横からかっさらわれたんじゃ、それはあんまりですからね。そこは私もよく分かってます。もちろん向こうにもそれは伝えました。それで出てきた折衷案がこれです。
まずアルファベットプロジェクト内の新規事業として高野さんの研究を立ち上げます。理事会の承認を経れば正式に予算をつけることができますからね。高野さんには客員という形でプロジェクトに参加していただき、研究に携わるという形になります。
If she wanted their funding, she'd have to fall under their authority, of course. So far, she had no objections.
研究会は今回の研究に予算をつけるにあたり、いくつかの条件を挙げています。一つは、先ほど先生が申し上げた、この度の研究に関する分野で優秀な才能を持つ人物に研究筆頭を委ねることです。
And that will go to Coach.
お言葉を返すようですが、私以上にこの研究に詳しい人物が、高野先生を除いて存在するとお思いですか
？Dr. Idia.
まあ、そこは高野さん抑えて。お気持ちはごもっともです。
それでは その人物に私が研究を売り渡すのと何も変わらないではありませんか。全く話が違います。
落ち着きなさい、高野さん。
Those cunning old men didn't miss sight of the faint leak of anger that crossed Takano's expression. They gave evasive laughs as if remarking how immature she still was if she let her emotions show over such a little thing. However, they weren't laughing to look down on Takano. On the contrary, they were trying to tell her that, to wait until the end.
もちろん、そこはあなたのやりやすいように手を打ちます。小泉先生からあなたをよろしく頼むと念を押されているんです。大恩ある小泉先生に託されたあなたを私がないがしろにするとお思いですか？大丈夫です。ここは一つ私に任せてください。あなたもそして連中も納得するうまい妥協点を用意します。
と申しますと？
その人物の人選は私が握っているということですよ。
Everyone chortled except Takano. After a moment, she joined in. In other words, he meant that he would find just the right person. The defense agency had suggested finding an expert to lead the project because they didn't feel comfortable with just Takano. However, Takano's sponsor was the one tasked to find such a person. In that moment, Takano realized it. Ah, how wonderful it is to have such a powerful backer.
私に任せてください。あなたがやりやすい候補者をこちらで探します。高野さんはその中から踏みやすいと思う相手を選べばいいということです。
Takano felt better after hearing that. While she wouldn't be the official head of the project, she would end up leading it from the shadows. Of course, she wasn't an expert per se. Having a partner would actually be beneficial.
この件、しばらく先方と私の方で調整します。もちろん、高野さんの満足のいく形で決着できるようにしますので、しばらく朗報を待ってください。
お世話になりますが。
そうだそうだ、防衛庁の話だけじゃないよ。厚生省の永田君も一枚噛んでくれるそうだよ。国立感染症予防研究所の伊藤君を紹介してくれてね。機材や技術についてのバックアップを名乗り出てくれてる。
本当ですか？ありがとうございます。
もうこれは立派な国家プロジェクトですな。おめでとう高野さん。これも今日までのあなたと、そして高野先生の地道な研究が評価された結果です。
いえ、すべて高野先生の努力の成果です。私などまだ何も。
謙虚なのは実にいいことです。小泉先生もおっしゃっておられましたが、本当に高野さんはいい方ですな。可愛がられているというのもうなずけます。
それでですね、向こうとしては高野さんの身分を防衛庁で預かってしまいたいようです。幸い高野さんは医師免許をお持ちですからね。研究本部の医官として身分を保証するようです。
それは公務員になれということですか？これは意外な話ですね。
アルファベットプロジェクトに携わる研究機関のほとんどは公的機関です。今回の研究は陸自も強い関心を寄せており、職員を陸自から派遣したいと強く要望してきています。
The SDF? What the fuck?
ですので、場合によっては身分は陸自の扱いになるかもしれません。
まあこの辺は役人の縄張り争いだと思ってください。その役人たちの上に立つには役人の身分が必要になってくると、そういうわけですな。
Well, it makes sense, right? The JSDF, or, the Japanese Special Defense Force, is the one that ends up cleaning up after the Great Hinamizawa disaster. So I guess it makes sense that she would be technically a member, right? And she's gotta, read the manual and, execute that order and so on.
もちろん、どういう形になろうとも、高野さんが不快に思うようなことにはしませんから、安心してください。
わかりました。そのあたりはお任せいたします。しかし、高野先生がかつて旧日本軍にこの研究の援助を求めた時には断られたことを思うと、自衛隊が興味を示されたのは意外というか恐
は仕方ありますまいな。戦況が悪化していた日本軍が求めていたのは即効性があり、瞬時に戦局をひっくり返せるものだったのでしょう。
I'm gonna very quickly lower the music again, because my god, it's still a little too loud, even though, oh, my settings got fucking reset, I think. Well, let's lower the music a tiny bit more. Like, well, now it's, hold on, we'll see. Once it comes back on. There we go. This should be fine. Sorry about that.
決して高野先生の研究を見下していたわけではないはずです。
It was just kind of drowning out the voices a little bit. That wasn't true, of course. Takano already heard that confession from the old man. She exhaled. To her, it was like the meeting in front of her was happening somewhere far away. She had longed for this day to come and worked so hard to reach it. Finally, her grandfather and his research were attaining recognition. This was the day that she had dreamed of. So she was frightened just imagining that it might be an actual dream. True joy can't be felt all at once. Oftentimes, it's a delayed reaction. Takano thought that must be exactly what she was feeling.
すると思います。多分左官クラスの階級が与えられるのではないでしょうか。となると高野さんは副隊長の地位になりますから、おそらく3差ではないかと。
これは素晴らしい。高野3差ですか。いやいや、羨ましいですな。男に生まれたからには一度くらいは自分のことを階級で呼ばれてみたいものですが。いやはや、高野3差ですか。3
差何ですか？
ああ、自衛隊の階級のことで3等陸佐のことです。企業でいうところの副部長くらいでしょうね。おそらくその階級がプロジェクト発足時に高野さんに与えられることになるかと思います。
旧日本軍でいうところの少佐ですよ。そういえば奇遇です。高野先生も旧軍では少佐の階級にあられたそうではありませんか。
You can't tell if they're fucking with her. With all this. Because they're like, oh, it would be like if you were a lieutenant commander in the old Japanese army. What a coincidence! The other Dr. Takano was also a lieutenant commander in the old military. The dude says as he looks around at everyone else, and everyone's like, oh. Takano remembered suddenly. They were right. Her grandfather had been a lieutenant commander in the Japanese military. Everything she had done until today was so she could continue her grandfather's research. Now everything had fallen into place. She had been granted the same rank as her grandfather. She had always believed that succeeding his research would be proof that they had a bond tighter than blood. And now she would even be the same rank as him. This is fate, Takano thought. Maybe this is even a message from Grandpa. Yes, it must have been a shout of encouragement from heaven. It was proof that she inherited not only his research, but his will as well. Takano couldn't help but feel a major sense of destiny for attaining the rank of major.
おじいちゃん、私、ようやくここまで来たよ。
Nobody else could hear her say that, but her grandfather in heaven could. That's what Takano believed. She had only come so far. There were still a lot of things to do for his research to be recognized as a great work. Otherwise, her grandfather won't become a god. She wouldn't become one either. You must become a god. That was in her grandfather's will. I wasn't able to do so. That line preceded it. It was her grandfather's dying wish. Her grandfather entrusted it to her. All of his research. A god can't be physically brought back to life. A god can be made in the hearts of people who remain alive. A god is made in the hearts of people who remain alive. Her grandfather will live on in her heart. His exploits will be known to many, and all of the scholars will fight to read his documents, to steal them from each other. And they will learn about Hifumi Takano, who began his research during the war. They will know that nobody understood him and that he ended up devoting his lonely life to his research. And finally, they will extol his grand achievement. Crazy. And that seems to be the end of chapter 2. Now, sorry for kind of reading a little quickly. It's just, we literally just got a lore dump for like just what was going on in World War II. That was literally like 5 or 10 pages of just dialogue where if we boil it down, like nothing happened. It's just like, here's a bunch of history in Japan. This final little snippet is what's important to the story. This soldier might have caused this conflict, and they were from Hinamizawa. And that's all that fucking mattered from that. So it was just a ton of just miscellaneous like reading for just historical shit. But anyway, I think this is a good stopping point for today. So let's get ready to swap on over to the ending screen.